Sorry. Okay. And I cannot make this. Okay. So let's open this. Okay. Okay, so welcome back to all of the partners. So we're here in the second day of this conference, and yesterday we saw a little bit of the situation in Spain, of the situation of minors that come to Europe, by themselves. And well, we were able to see how the changes in legislation that we've seen in the last year, and how this has positively affected many youngsters. But we could also see that this is only one part of the picture, and that we saw that if it's not accompanied by other measures, nothing can be achieved. And we saw a clear example of two people where one case in which the system worked well, and a case where it didn't work that well, and how that has impacted differently their life stories. So today we're going to see a little bit more of we're going to be able to share and learn about how this issue is and works in other European countries, in our partner countries. And I don't know if our first is ready. She's not here, right? No. We're gonna see. What? Well, I don't have her. It's the same time zone, right? With Poland. Vale. I'm going to check with her very quickly. The what? No, but it's here. I opened up a new one, just in case. So our partners from Poland were not capable of coming because they have a difficult situation in Poland now with the arrival of a lot of Ukrainian refugees. So that's what they're gonna talk to us about. I'm sure they have a lot to say about the topic and about minors who are arriving in Ukraine. But I don't know, she should be connected by now. Well, since we have no news from our colleagues in Poland, I think we can start with our second presentation, and whenever they're ready, we'll go back to her, okay? So, the second one will be our colleagues from Slovenia. So, no, not Slovenia, sorry. My mistake, from Lithuania. And yes, they're gonna explain how the situation is in Lithuania. So Leah, whenever, not Leah, Akvil. I will. Okay, whenever you're ready, you can take the floor. You need to keep this one. Okay.
Should I just close it? Yeah, of course. Okay. No problem. No. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay. I hope that people can see my slides as well. So I come from Lithuania, an organization called Diversity Development Group. We do research and migration, and my name is Akvila. I'm a researcher there. So again, I think a lot of people are more like practice-oriented here, practitioners. Our organization does not provide services. So, we kind of just do desk research, policy reviews, etc. So I will start with, sorry, that's not how, I'm sorry, do you know how to go to next slide with this software system? Just the next slide.
And the next,
yeah.
Here.
Oh, okay, that's amazing, thank you. So first I will give a brief overview of legal framework, just to kind of introduce what it's like, and then I'll go to more like practice-oriented details. So generally speaking, we have our main law is that regulates all entries, including the law on the legal status of aliens. Including unaccompanied minors is the law on the legal status of aliens. And it defines an accompanied minor alien as an alien under the age of 18 who entered the Republic of Lithuania without parents or other legal representatives, or who remain in the Republic of Lithuania without them until those persons began to take effective care of him. So I think this is pretty typical kind of definition according to the EU directives. Generally, when we speak of an unaccompanied minor, is the legal EU framework is dominating in terms of public discourses and kind of the language that we use around them. And as I think it's pretty typical in the EU context, unaccompanied minors are considered as vulnerable. They have special admission procedures, and as well as there is a legal framework regarding guardianship. So all that is pretty typical. What is important to mention in terms of days here is that in 2004 we had the first law on the legal status of aliens, and it defined unaccompanied minors, but a lot of things remain unregulated. And it was actually in 2014 when there was a separation made between unaccompanied minors who are asylum seekers and those who are not asylum seekers. So 2014 was kind of the year when we really kind of started to take procedures more seriously. There is a description regarding the various procedures and accommodation, etc., of unaccompanied minors who are not asylum seekers, which actually, as I will talk a little bit later, is the majority in Lithuania, as again, from what I hear in quite a few European countries. Interestingly enough, so for a while we didn't even have any order that regulated the entry and the rights of unaccompanied minors. So the first unaccompanied minors in Lithuania arrived in 1995, if I'm not mistaken, and until 2004 we had nothing on that. So again, the legal framework in Lithuania is very much derived from kind of EU frameworks, and are still kind of every few years there are kind of some updates, and depending on the station we need some adaptation to our national context. So the law on the legal status of aliens defines very clearly what rights unaccompanied minors have. So they have to be provided with accommodation and maintenance. They have to study according to a general education or vocational training program. So this must be ensured. They must enter education at latest after 3 months since they are identified. They receive necessary medical care free of charge. They should have free access to social services. They use they should be able to use state-guaranteed legal aid, and they should be able to contact representatives of non-governmental and international organizations. What also happened with the 2014 regulation of unaccompanied minors who are not asylum seekers, so we had, again, as I mentioned already, there was this document that kind of really gave a lot of clarity to people who are not asking for asylum, and what the state institutions should kind of do to protect them, and also like where should they be accommodated, what are the legal rights they have, etc. So the State Border Guard Service is the institution that collects and registers information and conducts an interview. So if an unaccompanied minor is older than 14 years old, there is the fingerprints are taken from him or her. There is an interview during which someone who's providing legal services, state-guaranteed legal services, they must be there, and upon the need, there can be translation provided as well. If there are doubts regarding age of an unaccompanied minor, age assessment is conducted. This is very common. The institutions often doubt the age of an unaccompanied minor, so this is, a pretty common procedure that a lot of unaccompanied minors have to go through. And then, once the identification registration process is passed, unaccompanied minors are transferred to the refugee reception center. So this is, for the longest time, this was the only real institution in Lithuania that accepted unaccompanied minors and had, had again, like the order and special spaces for them, were introduced to the procedures, and like were qualified essentially to handle, protection of unaccompanied minors. So this, for the longest time ever, and up to this day, this is the kind of the institution that is responsible for unaccompanied minors while they are in Lithuania. So in terms of family search and people who also go missing, so Migration Department, with assistance of NGOs and international organizations, carries out a search for the family members of unaccompanied minors. If it happens that an unaccompanied minor goes missing, the Refugee Reception Center informs the police, Migration Department, and State Border Guard Service. And what is also important to kind of look into what happens in practice is that in most cases, the Refugee Reception Center employees are allocated as guardians, so specifically social workers that work in the Refugee Reception Center. They are usually the most common case. If there are no family members around that could be legal representatives on unaccompanied minors, social workers are being appointed. So this is pretty much from the legal point of view, the kind of regulations that I wanted to say, because now I'm going into practice and this will relate to the legal framework. So now I will just give a brief overview of the statistics and the issues that happen on the ground. So in terms of the numbers, if we look at the most recent years, we can see that actually from 2016 to 2020, the numbers of unaccompanied minors were not very big. There were some, but it was never exceeding really more than like 30, 40, 50. Yeah, for the past 2 years, only up to 25 unaccompanied minors per year. The vast majority of them are not asylum seekers, who didn't ask for asylum. Only very few are asylum seekers. You kind of see it here, but also the vast majority of them are boys rather than girls, with a few exceptions. And you can also see from the graph that 2020 was kind of exceptionally low in terms of numbers, because we think that this is because of the pandemic, because it was a lot of checkpoints, border checkpoints were actually closed, and kind of transit migration was quite difficult. So yeah, and generally speaking, a lot of them also, you kind of see it from this graph, but for quite a few years, until 2020, majority of them were from Vietnam. So they kind of came quite a long way, and then they crossed the Eastern EU border. If we look at 2020, it's only 3 unaccompanied minors in the entire year that came to Lithuania. There is no Vietnam anymore, so there is Belarus, Russia, and Afghanistan. So in terms of Belarus and Russia, with Belarus, this is probably associated with the political turmoil in Belarus. It's a neighboring country to Lithuania. Russia is also actually a neighboring country through Kaliningrad. And then we have also one person coming from Afghanistan. So if you notice, I very purposefully didn't put the year 2021, because now I want to tell very briefly, those who were in Prague, you will know, those who were not there, very briefly what happened in Lithuania in the summer of 2021, because this will be important for the changes when it comes to unaccompanied minors in Lithuania. So in the summer of 2021, Lithuania first, and then Latvia and Poland, in those countries we had a large increase of irregular migration via Belarus. So this was migration of people who came from mainly Iraq, as well as Congo, Syria, Cameroon, Afghanistan, but Iraq was kind of the main origin country for a while. These people came from Belarus to the Eastern EU border. They it was a mixed migration flow, so a lot of them wanted asylum, not all of them wanted asylum. They came through Belarus because the Belarus regime was putting efforts into kind of advertising the Belarus route. This is, the context is that the relationship between the Belarus and Lithuania, but also Poland and Latvia, it's quite tense because of the, again, political turmoil that's happening in Belarus. And yeah, we had this increase of irregular migrants. And if you can see from the map, there is, the numbers start increasing in June, and then they really skyrocket in July, and especially the end of July. So, being brief, on the 3rd of August, Lithuania starts to implement pushbacks. Before that, we had no pushbacks. And only exceptions are made for vulnerable persons. So if you can see those little peaks that kind of are there in the graph after August. So these are exceptions for vulnerable persons. Unaccompanied minors technically are vulnerable persons, so they should be allowed into the country. However, there is no screening or monitoring of whether all people actually enter, considering the age confusion and the fact that no one is actually not at least systematically conducting age assessment at the border. We don't know if all unaccompanied minors are actually allowed into Lithuania. There is no way to check, essentially. Because also statistics even sometimes are imprecise, because the Border Guard Service says that they didn't know how many people are in the group. So, this really raises questions about whether they can check whether people are unaccompanied minors or adult migrants. So yeah, overall, mainly in June and July, but also a little bit later with the exceptions, since January 2021, up to yesterday, Lithuania accepted 4,416 irregular migrants. 25 of them were minors. A lot of them came with families, so these are not unaccompanied minors, but also the number includes unaccompanied minors. So this was a huge increase of irregular migration in Lithuania, where Lithuania never faced such irregular migration of such scale. What happens with unaccompanied minors in 2021? So, we had around 20 people in the past few years, and in 2021, all of a sudden, we have 190 unaccompanied minors. That is, again, Lithuania is a small country, not a lot of experience with unaccompanied minors. All of a sudden, we have pretty large numbers. They come from various countries, so you can see here, a huge spectrum, mainly countries from Middle East and Africa, so Guinea, Iraq, Cameroon, Congo, these countries mainly, but also others. And if you can see the difference, people who arrived before June 15, there are only 14 of them, and then unaccompanied minors who arrived after mid-June. Via Belarus, it's 170 of them. most of them are boys. So there were, in 2022, however, if we look at the numbers, there are only 62 unaccompanied minors left, or who joined, but essentially there's a huge decrease from 190 to 62 unaccompanied minors in refugee reception center. And in 2021 alone, 112 of unaccompanied minors have left the center, which means that we have this huge issue of disappearance. The disappearance of unaccompanied minors happened before as well. So in 2017, IOM wrote kind of a report about how unaccompanied minors usually go missing within a week of entering the refugee reception center. But because the numbers were relatively smaller, it was still a huge issue, but people talked about it a bit less, and now we have this huge issue of a lot of, more than 100 people missing every year who are unaccompanied minors. And no one really knows, they just leave independently. So no one really knows or follows where they're going. Or they don't also know if they're safe. This is a table that should not look like this. But yeah. Sorry, maybe I can go. Okay. Well, I cannot show you all of the numbers, but okay, I will tell you what's supposed to be in the lower part of the table. So essentially, if we look also at the other issue, which is guardianship, so the average number of children assigned to one guardian was pretty low when the numbers were pretty low. So usually a few unaccompanied minors to one social worker at a refugee reception center. These were allocated between 1 week and 1 month. After the person was identified, the unaccompanied minors data was collected, etc. So the system kind of worked, but then when we have a huge increase in irregular migrants and also increase in unaccompanied minors, we, at one period, so the third quarter of 2021, we had 162 unaccompanied minors allocated to one guardian. So I generally have a lot of questions about how effective can be the system when one social worker has so many unaccompanied minors to kind of take care of, to make sure that their best interests are secured and that they get all the legal services, social services they need. I have a lot of questions about that, and it just kind of showed that when the system got overstrained, it kind of collapsed. Yeah. And other issues that are related to the situation in 2021 is that on July the 13th, 2021, in response, the Parliament has passed amendments to the law on the legal status of aliens. And what happened was that mass detention was legalized, de facto detention. So the restrictions of freedom of movement. And that also didn't exclude vulnerable groups, which meant that unaccompanied minors can't be detained. What also happened was that, again, in an extraordinary situation or state of war of emergency, as of the amendments in July, fast-track asylum procedure, without any exceptions for persons who belong to vulnerable groups, were, again, legalized. So, those unaccompanied minors had to, their applications were processed really quickly. They had to apply for asylum really quickly. They had to apply for, they had to appeal really quickly. And again, if you're unaccompanied minors and there are huge issues with access to legal services overall, it's really tough. The access to asylum procedure was hugely limited in reality and practice for you. What also happened kind of with, again, this is not moving away from the legal aspects. What happened that, again, the system is overstrained, access to social services for minors, psychological assistance, legal consultations, all of that became really difficult to access. Unaccompanied minors before their age were identified. For a while, were also accommodated with other adult migrants, and because a lot of the time there is no trust about their age. People think that they're older than they are. The unaccompanied minors, they just assumed to be adults if they kind of look like they could be adults. And then, only after their age identification is carried out. So, and if these are minors together with adults and, not considering a lot of the ethnic kind of divisions perhaps in the origin country, if they come from the same country, that's not a very safe environment for them. Also, the children's right to play and leisure is not properly ensured. This is related to detention and kind of the fact that there are just container camps in Lithuania. And again, later, the unaccompanied migrants were moved to a special facility near in the refugee reception center. But for a while, if there was lack of trust regarding their age, there were very few possibilities regarding kind of just having a proper leisure. And there is a generally longer procedure to identify unaccompanied minors, which is a problem when you have these circumstances as mentioned. So this is actually my last slide. Didn't want to go into conclusions or recommendations because I'm very, very interested to hear what others have to say. As you can see, the guardianship, the fact that there are lots of people who go missing, lots of unaccompanied migrants who go missing. And so these issues, including the kind of legal and de facto access issues, these are the main issues we have in Lithuania right now. The topic of unaccompanied minors was not a very big topic until now. I think it's increasingly becoming more important because we have, first of all, deterioration of the situation, but also we have just larger numbers in general. So there's not a lot of discussion regarding employment, access to work, and what happens to the people when they turn 18. So the discussion regarding unaccompanied minors in Lithuania, at least from our perspective, it's very much in still relatively infancy stages. So that's why I'm very happy to be here and to hear what others have to say. I am myself no expert on this topic. I just reviewed some policies and data that was available to me. So that's about the situation in Lithuania. It's not that great. I hope it will be improving, and I'm looking forward to get inspiration from others. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Aquila. So I think it's very interesting and you probably maybe have questions for her as well, but our Polish colleagues are waiting now. She's in Zoom, and they are also in a hurry, so we're going to give them the floor, and maybe afterwards, if people, because I think it's interesting, and there might be a conversation here, so, but after this, because they need to leave at 11. So. Okay, now. I think I need to give her access. That was the problem. Do you know how? Yes. Okay. Now? No. Where? Okay, she's here. Okay, perfect. I don't have to do anything. Okay. Hello, Kasia. Welcome.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. We can hear you perfectly. Okay. So sorry for the technical problem before. I'm glad we finally could make it work. So as I said, Kasia is our colleague from Poland, and they have had an important flux of Ukrainian refugees lately, including minors and minors who travel alone. So she's gonna talk to us a little bit about that. And I'm not gonna take any more time because I know you're in a hurry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me online. I really wish I was able to travel to San Sebastian. I really love this area, and Donostia is extremely beautiful. So I hope you enjoy. However, the situation in Poland has been so difficult recently that we are all working under pressure, and it's been very difficult to just manage with all the challenges and all the tasks. So today I wanted to speak a little bit about the situation of migrants, of unaccompanied minors and separated children arriving in Poland from Ukraine. I have some slides, but I cannot actually share them because it says that Zoom has switched off the option so.
No. I think now you can share it.
Try okay.
Now.
It's just oh yeah, okay, now it works. Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of background about the kind of the scope of the situation that we are working with and the number of children that are coming into Poland. So far, since the beginning of the war, and this is data until the 2nd of May, so it's more now people now that we speak. So until the 2nd of May, over 3 million people from Ukraine arrived in Poland, and over 1 million registered already for temporary protection in Poland. Actually, according to government sources, this is information from UNHCR, but according to government sources, the number of people from Ukraine in Poland right now is 1,600,000 at least, meaning that simply not everyone just kind of went through the procedure, but they are already in Poland and deciding what they will do next. And among this 1 million, UNHCR estimates that almost 200,000 Ukrainian children already enrolled in schools and kindergartens. So this is a very specific, I would say, population, and a very provides very specific challenges because the majority of people who are coming are women and children. So we have a very high rate of children coming. Usually, according to information, again, from the procedures that were initiated in Poland, and this is called the PESEL data, which is a kind of identification number that people fleeing Ukraine are entitled to register for. And once they register for this number, they actually have access to all sorts of benefits and different forms of assistance. So according to information from the PESEL data, 48% of everyone involved in the PESEL data database are actually adult women, and children are making up for 47% of everyone who's enrolled. And of course, there's a separation of gender among children. So as you can see, just the sheer volume of people coming indicates that we have a lot of children on our hands. The situation of refugees is also quite specific in Poland because they are not normally being placed in accommodation centers, in refugee centers, but the majority of them are either hosted by Polish people in their homes, and this is some 600,000 people. Some 800,000 are either living on their own, or they're staying with Ukrainian families who migrated to Poland before the war, because Poland already had a major Ukrainian population even before the war started. And only 200,000 Ukrainian refugees are actually staying in government-run reception centers. So it means that for the majority of people who are coming, for the majority of refugees who are coming, there's no direct institutional or governmental supervision of their situation. And therefore, this presents a lot of additional challenges, especially challenges concerning children. Among this whole population, it's very difficult to say how many are unaccompanied minors. According to the information from the so-called blue dots run by UNHCR, these are kind of hubs providing information and different services in major cities. In Krakow right now we have a working hub in Warsaw, in Krakow, and some additional hubs are right now being developed. And according to information from these hubs, UNHCR estimates that about 1% of everyone who is approaching these hubs may be an unaccompanied minor. So this is quite a lot of children who are traveling on their own. What happens, and also what we see from just the experience of different actors providing protection and providing assistance to refugees from Ukraine, is that there's a very large group of Ukrainian teenagers who are coming here without anyone. So they're coming here actually as unaccompanied minors, because Ukrainian law actually specifically allows 16-year-olds or children who are 17, who are not yet 18, to travel abroad on their own. So there's a specific legal possibility that they are exploring. And simply, they can travel on their own, and very often by their parents, they are seen as, adult people or almost adult, and therefore is sent to Poland to fend for themselves. So this is one of the kind of practical challenges that we are dealing with, because the situation in the legal terms, situation in Poland is quite complex right now. As you know, we have the EU Temporary Protection Directive, which is implemented by all EU states, but there are certain elements of this directive that are up to the decision of the states. And we have a special act which is introduced by Poland, and has been actually introduced by Poland even before the EU Temporary Directive entered into force. And this is Act on Assistance to Ukrainian Citizens in the context of the armed conflict in Ukraine. So there's a specific act, and this specific act provides, I would say, more generous access to services and more generous benefits to everyone who is qualified under this act. However, the categories of people included are not the same as the categories of EU Temporary Protection Directive. So the EU Temporary Protection Directive is wider in the scope of application, but is less generous in the scope of forms of assistance provided. So when you are arriving in Poland from Ukraine due to war, so you're escaping a war, you will find, don't worry, I will not go through all of these different categories, but you may find yourself in a situation where you really are, you are not clear about what kind of legal pathway is there for you, and which is the most kind of applicable procedure that you should be pursuing. So for minors who are coming, this is an additional difficulty and an additional challenge, because it's not as clear as it would seem on the outset, for people to be able to find what category they are under. Just kind of summarize this very shortly. If you have Ukrainian nationality, or you are a spouse of a Ukrainian national, then you are recognized under this special Polish law. So you are given this very kind of fast track access to services, and you have this very generous pack of different benefits and social forms of social assistance. So this is like the best situation you can find yourself in. However, there is a problem with these categories when it comes to children sometimes, because we see sometimes mixed marriages of Ukrainian nationals and non-Ukrainian nationals. And their children may sometimes also have mixed nationalities. And we had this one case, I think this is a very good example, of a family with 3 children. One of them, the eldest daughter, was actually already an adult, and she had a non-Ukrainian nationality. It was Armenian nationality, and the younger children had Ukrainian nationality. And when they came to Poland, without their parents, because the parents stayed in Ukraine to take care of the, of their properties and also of other relatives. It was this eldest daughter who was taking care of her brother and sister who were underage, and actually she was not qualified under this special law to benefit from the assistance, and she had to actually go and try to receive protection from the temporary protection directive. So sometimes these situations are quite complex, as I said. Even with one family, the legal pathways may be different. There are certain also ways of addressing protection needs of third country nationals, including the stateless, who were legally residing in Ukraine. And there's some additional conditions which the temporary protection directive states. So this is also part of the whole system. When it comes to unaccompanied minors, however, there are some specific solutions for Ukrainian minors who are coming to Poland due to war and the risks of war. And this, the problem of family separation has been acknowledged. And this is one of the major identified risk areas. So since the war has caused the disruption of family ties, and many people actually got separated from their relatives, children are arriving sometimes without their mothers. They are actually arriving with non-related adults, or they are simply being sent to Poland as the family believes that they are able to, as I said, fend for themselves. The problem arises when they enter Poland, that they should have a legal guardian, to represent them in every legal matter. So if there's no legal guardian available, there's a special procedure of establishing something which is called temporary legal guardianship. And this is a new kind of legal possibility that has been provided for in this new law. So this is a new institution, this is a new procedure. But the problem is always, identification of unaccompanied minors and kind of finding the suitable candidate for this legal guardianship. I will just very quickly talk about this procedure in a second. I think I have like 3 or 4 minutes left. Okay, so the other identified risks areas for the general population, but also specifically for children, are different discrimination related barriers, especially for people coming from marginalized groups. And I'm talking here specifically about people who are undocumented, belonging to various minorities, especially Roma minorities. Sometimes this minority background may also overlap with being stateless or being undocumented, or being undocumented and stateless. And then it's very difficult to actually prove that this person can benefit from the temporary protection directive or from the Act on Ukrainian nationals. Another issue is, of course, mental health and psychosocial support. This is a huge need, in Poland, and just considering the number of people who are in this situation, it really poses a huge challenge to the Polish system, which has not been perfect anyways. And now with the additional barriers, with the linguistic barriers, it's been more and more difficult. Let me just hop onto this slide. So when we are talking about specifically, risks for children, as I said, family separation is the #1 risk. Low recognition rate, meaning that it's very, very difficult to kind of be identified as an unaccompanied minor in the process, because Poland has been very liberal in allowing everyone from Ukraine to enter their borders, and the registration of people coming has not been very I would say, attentive. It's not very restrictive. So as a result, minors who are coming on their own, or they're coming without their parents, but just accompanied by other adult people, they may go unnoticed in the system for a long while. So until they actually try to register for the PESEL number, so for the identification number, it may be very difficult to actually kind of identify them and recognize their special status among the Ukrainian refugees. And without this identification as unaccompanied minors, of course, they are not entitled to any special forms of treatment. So from time to time, we actually have situations where an unaccompanied minor approaches our office, one of our lawyers, seeking legal advice on his own or on her own. And it's, you know, quite problematic to witness this, because of course then we have to initiate the whole process of establishing temporary guardianship. And you know, these minors, very often these are teenagers, as I said, sometimes they're not really willing to go through the process, and they're not really willing to, for example, to go to foster care, you know, if this is the only possibility for them. Another challenge is that we have no comprehensive and centralized accommodation solution for unaccompanied minors who are coming from other countries, so foreign-born. And therefore, when there is a need to place a minor in foster care, the process is to find any suitable accommodation among different facilities that assist children. So it's quite random, you know. It's not like there's certain assistance centers, the children homes, etc., that are kind of specialized and have specialized services and specialized staff that can help a Ukrainian-born minor, but they will be just placed anywhere. And therefore, you know, very often it's quite problematic when it comes to just working with this minor because of the linguistic barrier, cultural barriers, and specific needs of these children. There's also a very high rate of psychological distress among children arriving, and PTSD cases. And the problem is in accessing psychological assistance in Poland for children. You know, just in general, psychological assistance for children in Poland is very poor. And now, additionally, you know, the need to provide this assistance in Ukrainian language or in Russian language, you know, this has been very, very difficult. And the waiting for an appointment with a psychologist or a psychiatrist is quite long. Human and child trafficking risks, these are of course present in any mass influx of refugees situation. And right now we are, we are working in a state of emergency. We have a humanitarian crisis at our hands. So we are quite aware that child trafficking may happen. And therefore it's very important to have sound mechanisms of screening for potential victims, identifying potential victims or victims, and then providing them with adequate assistance, and then pursuing the legal procedures against the perpetrators. But this is problematic because not everyone is recognized, not everyone is registered, not everyone is in the database. So if we don't have the full information about the number of unaccompanied minors coming from Ukraine, then it's very difficult to actually provide for these kind of safety mechanisms that would involve everyone. Child neglect, child abuse risks. This is always a risk that arises in a population that is displaced, that may be forcing, maybe experiencing a lot of different, problems in Poland, and therefore this is something that we have to be aware of. I have to finish now, so I'm happy to answer questions later on, or just join you later on. A big hello to everyone in Indonesia who is on the project and cooperating on the project. I hope you have a good day today and enjoy a little bit of sun. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasia. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll see you later. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry we don't have time for questions for Kasia. I think it will be really interesting, but maybe she can join us later as well. Okay? And now I'm going to give the floor now, yes, to our colleagues in Slovenia from Slovenska Filantropi, and Kaya and Lia. The floor is yours.
Can you please just start the presentation for me?
I will talk later.
Nora, can you just help me? How do you start presentation here? Not really sure. Which one is it? It's a bit different. All right. So today we are here to present situation in Slovenia. My name is Leia, and here with us today is also Kaya, our precious volunteer. At the moment, we both work at Slovenska Filantropi. I mainly work with volunteers who are working directly with migrants of different statuses. As well as that, I'm a social worker, so I do offer psychosocial help and support. So we'll be talking about challenges that unaccompanied minors face in Slovenia, and also we'll be giving some examples of our own experience, since I was a legal guardian for unaccompanied minors and Kaya is in training to become one. Something about our organization. It's a humanitarian organization that promotes volunteering since 1992. It was actually established based on responding the needs of people that were fleeing the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that's also the time when we started working with unaccompanied minors. We have quite different programs at our organization, but the main one is working on migration field. Inside this program, we have a day center for migrants. We do different courses for learning Slovenian language. We offer a wide spectrum of activities for children, for women. And lately we also started with cultural mediators, who are people with their own experience of immigration, now helping refugees with interpreting and just integration to a new system. As well as that, we are advocating for appropriate legislation and practice in the same field. We are advocating for appropriate protection of unaccompanied minors, submitting proposals for a change in legislation, and actively debating about different options of placement of unaccompanied minors, since the solution is still not in place. As mentioned, we started working with minors since the establishment of our organization. However, in the year of 2001, our organization also started offering guardianships for minors. That was for minors who applied for protection, international protection, also for those who got a status of international protection, and for those who were placed in detention centers. It was quite noticeable that this system of guardianship is not optimal. It was based on volunteering, so employees of our organization worked that, and also other volunteers. And as well as that, it was increasing number of unaccompanied minors coming to Slovenia. So we decided that we will stop with the guardianships. That was in 2016, and proposed a new option, which is a system of legal guardianships. So each child coming to Slovenia asking for international protection is appointed a legal guardian. At the moment, our organization is offering support to those legal guardians, and we are part of the training for newly established legal guardians. To give you a bit of feeling what's the situation in Slovenia, you can see here the years from 2012 to 2021. And below that, you can see the numbers of unaccompanied minors that applied for international protection in Slovenia. So this increased after year 2016. So in the last year, 2021, there were almost 800 unaccompanied minors applying for international protection. You can see that most of them coming from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Egypt, Bangladesh. Of those, 16 female and almost 800 male. You can see the ages below, most of them aged between 16 and 17 years old. Now, if you remember the number, so almost 800 minors asking for international protection last year, 19 of those got international protection. However, at this point, it's important to say that Slovenia is a transit country for most of them. In the year of 2020, 98% of unaccompanied minors left the country before their procedure for asylum was concluded. It's really important to say at this point that it's much harder to detect any vulnerabilities in that short period of time that children are passing through our country. And that's why it's even more important that all organizations and institutions follow child's best interest. Some of the assumptions why unaccompanied minors are leaving Slovenia. For sure, Slovenia is a small country. A lot of them, they didn't know about Slovenia before, and they had a different country in mind when they were traveling. However, we do have really long asylum procedures and long family reunification processes. It is estimated that now that it's about 1 year that they get a decision about their status. Then there is a fear of being returned to the country of origin or the country they arrived from. Usually that's Croatia. Inappropriate living conditions. They are hoping for a better future for themselves, or they are forced to leave because of human trafficking. So what are the options for minors in Slovenia? At the border, there's an option of returning to a neighboring country by interstate agreements. Lately, we notice more and more pushbacks happening, so that's the fact that children are not believed of their age. Police there is showing them the way. A lot of minors actually said that the police said, go through the bridge and you'll be going to the capital city of Slovenia, but in fact that bridge leads them back to Croatia. Then another option is applying for international protection. Then returning to the country of origin, family reunification in a third country, permission to stay, and lately for children from Ukraine, temporary protection. So there are quite a lot of challenges that we face in Slovenia. The most important one would be minors are not treated as children, as they should be by the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Instead, they are treated based on their immigration status, which means different level of protection, different rights. We have a lack of holistic approach, that's for sure, from different organizations. A placement, so as some kind of assistance to a solution is still not in place. We need to say it was much worse before because children were placed in asylum homes together with other asylum seekers, which were above 18 years old. Now that's not happening anymore. They are placed in a student's home together with other Slovenian students. We still think there is a room for improvement. Another thing is we still have a detention center where children can be placed. Those are the ones who do not wish to apply for international protection or they get a negative. So in year 2021, there were 238 children placed there. So detention center is an institution guarded with police, with restricted movement, and children shouldn't be placed there. So Slovenska Filantropi, together with other NGOs, have been fighting for quite a long that this wouldn't be the case anymore, but unfortunately it is. We have quite disharmonized system of guardianship, meaning that a child can, in quite a short period of time, a child can get 4 different guardians caring for him. So the first one is the boarder, appointed by the Center of Social Work. It's a bit different system of guardian. It's a guardian for special case. Then they get a new guardian where they are placed from the Center of Social Work. Then they get a legal guardian, and if they are granted a status, they get a new guardian. So the system for sure is not optimal. There's still insufficient training of professionals working with the minors in asylum home, in a student home, and we think that should improve. Insufficient psychosocial and psychotherapeutic help and support, limited provision of interpreters for different dialects. As I mentioned before, the really long procedures, minors should be given priority during that procedure, but it doesn't look it's that way. So, as mentioned, now we have a system of legal guardians, and each child asking for protection is appointed one. The responsibilities of a guardian are quite narrow, and they are representing a child in the procedure of obtaining international protection, then representing a child in the field of health protection, education, and finance. It's important to say that legal guardian can be anyone who goes through a training and practical work, which we think it's not the best practice, because working with such a vulnerable group, there should be at least some psychological tests and other options to test new guardians. So, first time that a child and a new legal guardian meet, it's 15 minutes before the first interview. Another thing that cannot be changed. That's not sufficient time to meet a child, to represent your role, to say why are you there, to help them. When I spoke with children I worked before, they always said they did not understand my role, even though I tried my very best to explain my role at that short period of time. But that's why it's really, really important that we prepare ourselves, that we are there for them during the first and second interview, try to pay attention if they are in distress, to take a break, because we are the only one who can actually do that and suggest that kind of thing. The interview itself, it is a really scary situation for them. So a child is alone in a room together with 4 people they don't know. One of them, are you a legal guardian? Then decision maker, interpreter, and someone from legal department. And a child needs to tell a story of their life and saying why they need protection. There is a huge language barrier. We as legal guardians get interpreters just for official procedures. So those are those things that I mentioned before, which is not okay, because in my opinion, a legal guardian shouldn't be there just for official procedures. If you want to build trust with the child, you need to do much more than that. And interpreters are not provided for that. It happens a lot that a child doesn't speak a common language. So we use different things as Google Translate and pantomime to communicate, but of course that's not efficient. So a child is then placed to a student home. As mentioned before, it's a better place than before being an asylum home. However, we think there is a room for improvement. I spoke with a lot of children. They mentioned they would prefer living in a house with a family or with friends in smaller units. And I think at this point it's really important to give voice to these children, and we support those suggestions. So we would support that Slovenia would go in the direction of fostering or smaller housing units provided for minors. So as I mentioned, for example, as a legal guardian, I was doing much more than just requirements of the ministry, but that means that you are volunteering. So not a lot of legal guardians want to do that. But speaking back with children I worked with, they said that's the part they like the most. So I was trying to widen their support network. I was trying to find some hobbies for them. It was scary for them to go for a first dancing lesson, so I went there with them to make it a bit easier. I was trying to find some summer activities for them. In a student home can be quite lonely during the summer because all the Slovenian students go out. And I think it's impossible to build a strong rapport with a child without extra time involved, even though this is not something that our ministry encourages. So it depends by the legal guardian how they do their job. And at this point, I would give my word to Kaya. She's our new legal guardian in training, so maybe she can tell a bit more how does that look like and share her experience, because she also works in a program of Slovenska Filantropi, mentoring a minor, and yeah, here you go.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Kaya, and I've been a volunteer in Slovenska Filantropi for the past 4 years. I study social work, and now I'm also doing my internship in the Daily Center for Migrants. Besides that, I recently decided to become a legal guardian for unaccompanied minors. So far, I have no practical experience with this, so unfortunately, I cannot provide an insight into that. But I have almost completed the theoretical training, so I will talk about that a little bit. The training is divided into 2 parts, theoretical and practical. The theoretical part lasts for 3 days each for 8 hours. Many people from different institutions come and give a lecture. For example, they come from the Social Work Center, from different NGOs that work in this field, like, for example, the one that offers free legal advice, the one that works in the area of social inclusion, also Slovenska Filantropi comes. Then a decision maker from the ministry, employees from the asylum home, professionals from different relevant areas, like, for example, social security, sociology, law, psychology, etc. And even some legal guardians that have been doing this for a long time come and offer practical advice. For example, Leia came with a former unaccompanied minor, which I think was really important because for some attendees of the training, this was the first contact with a refugee ever, and then they could ask him some questions. The second contact was later during the practical part of the training when we went to the student dormitory where the minors are living together with Slovenian students. And I have to say that in Slovenia, the topic of migration is quite sensitive because it's either approached from a negative perspective or just completely ignored. So the general public doesn't really have a lot of knowledge and or contact with refugees, minors, the migrants or asylum seekers. And I recently read an article in a local newspaper about an unaccompanied minor fleeing alone from Ukraine, and the people in the comments were outraged and shocked how something like this is even possible. And I think that this really shows how little is known about this topic and how there is a serious need of spreading more awareness about this. And because of the lack of awareness, there's also not enough legal guardians, and the ones that are active are quite overwhelmed. Even though there's a limit of 3, in extreme cases 5 minors per person, I suppose it's still hard to do a quality job and properly address all the needs of a person when there is such a work overload. During my training, I noticed that all these institutions and professionals from different areas have really different expectations about what it means to be a legal guardian and what is the actual task of them, because depending on the area of the expertise that the lecturer came from, they either expect you to take a role of a lawyer or merely a bureaucrat that fills in papers, or a human rights violations advocate, or almost as a surrogate parent, as a language teacher, a study instructor, a therapist, a behavior manager, as a cultural mediator, as a preventer of human trafficking, even as sort of a supervision for the government. And I would like to explain this one a little bit. Recently, the law changed in Slovenia that states that if the minor trusts you their real age, which is above 18, you have to tell that to the relevant authorities, which I personally find very highly problematic, since there has to be a confidentiality agreement between you and the child, and also telling this information to the authorities could result in a deportation. So yeah, as the role is represented to potential future legal guardians, it almost sounds as a full-time job, which kind of scared some people away. The role of the legal guardian in Slovenia isn't defined as a job, it's more of an on-call work. They just call you when they need you, which can be a couple of times per week or once every few months. It completely depends on the number of children that are arriving. And even though some compensation is given, it's by far not enough to cover life expenses, and that's why most legal guardians need an actual job, which can sometimes be hard to balance with the role of the legal guardian. So perhaps I talked a little bit too much about the confusing and negative parts that come with taking this role in Slovenia. So I would also like to talk about a positive experience that I had when I worked as a volunteer on a program organized by Slovenska Filantropi. It was called MINT, which stands for Mentoring for Integration of Third Country National Children Affected by Migration. And I suppose that's pretty self-explanatory. They connected me with a 16-year-old from Palestine, and we worked together for about a year. And if I'm completely honest, I feel that the context of that program was still quite different than the one of the legal guardian, but I would like to highlight the most important parts that I believe were very important and significant in our time that we spent together. First, I would just like to point out that we had a lot of time and no pressure to develop any kind of trusting relation. It just happened spontaneously over the span of a few months. And most legal guardians don't have the time and the privilege for that to happen, since most of the minors leave quite soon, but also since, as Leah said, they meet 15 minutes before the interview and then suddenly they're supposed to develop a relationship, but of course it doesn't work that way. Yeah, if I look back and try to analyze what mattered and helped him the most, it was the trust we developed, the psychosocial support, the encouragement, the language support, and just always being there when he needed something. And despite the fact that some of the institutions wouldn't really agree with me, I think that this kind of relation is still the most beneficial for the mental stability of a minor, which is one of the most important aspects that we should be focusing on. And that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, there definitely is a social worker. At the start, actually, there wasn't any at nighttime, which we think it's quite highly problematic, but now there are people caring for them 24/7. So yeah, they have support, they have someone as vital teacher, yeah, being present and yeah, attending their needs.
Okay. Well, now we're going to give the floor to the last contribution by partners this morning, well, before the break, which will be our colleagues from Greece. And a moment. Sorry. Yes. You can come in, yeah. So we welcome our colleague from Interalia, Yakam. I'm trying to open. Who will talk about minors, well, the transition to adulthood of unaccompanied youngsters or minors. Okay.
It was F9, I guess. Sorry, can you help me? Is it okay? So, hello, good morning, everyone. Sorry. Okay. So, good morning. My name is Marianna. I come from Greece, from Interalia. I have a 5 years experience in the refugee context. I've been working in both managerial and field positions. Last 2 of them with unaccompanied minors, both as a field and as a coordinator and as a project coordinator. So I'm going to discuss briefly about the transition to adulthood, which is, how can I say it, is an aspect that actually worries all of us that work in the field with them. And it's highly related to their protection on, let's say, on a European basis, because it's a general issue. And then I'm going to discuss some brief, I'm going to give you like a brief introduction on what is happening now to Greece, where the legislation has changed and it actually leaves many of the minors, like many of the adults now, like people that are transited from adulthood to, from being unaccompanied minors to adulthood, like it brings them a big number of problems as they have no legal status at all. I don't know why it should not be like that. I cannot read. It's the problem with the presentation. It doesn't recognize the format. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll see. May I use my laptop?
I guess so. Well, I don't know.
Podemos conectar mi ordenador porque hay un problema con la presentación. So as the UN Committee, the Rights of the Child, defines a child as someone, are people under the age of 18, regardless their status, that should be guaranteed protection before reaching the age of majority. Among them, we find refugee children who are like the most vulnerable ones, as they live in camps, they live in insecurity, they face troubles in their everyday life, dangers, and are constantly in fear and instability. Within this general category of the children, we have like unaccompanied or separated minors who live by themselves, in many cases in camps or in various facilities, facing various risks, with the most, how can I say, like with the bigger one of them being exploited. So what happens? When they reach the age of 18, they stop being children anymore, so they are transiting to adulthood, which actually is a challenging process for many of them. It's actually a challenging process for the general population itself. I mean, even ourselves, when becoming 18, we face a number of difficulties. We see ourselves facing different situations. Imagine what could happen to a child that actually lives in a camp or in a facility, in a reception facility, that actually sees his life changing from one day to another. During this time, all these people have like different needs based on their cultural background, their intellectual background, their physical background, their social development, and during the transition, they face, how can I say, like they are usually stressed, they cannot cooperate, they're in a, how can I say, they are in a daily anxiety, they face I'm sorry, I'm a bit stressed and I'm trying to think about it and express myself. And the words sound kind of difficult to come out of my mouth. So when they face this situation, actually those ones that live in Greece, they know that most probably they will face homelessness, they will be left in the streets, they will have no legal rights, and no one actually to protect them. No guardians, no legal system, no social security system, nothing. Okay, so as I said, this transition is related to challenges and issues, which means that when they turn 18, they lose all the additional rights that they lost while they traveled from their country of origin to Greece or to the European soil. I mean, imagine yourself being a Syrian or an Afghan boy that had to travel from Afghanistan to Iran and then through Turkey and then through Turkey to Greece, to realize that you actually lost all your childhood, lost all the experiences that you should have as a child, coming to Greece and losing your future as well. Actually coming to Europe and in many cases losing your future as well. You lose like a big part of your life and you don't know what to do to recover it. Okay. There are some, the transition to adulthood, it's how can I say it, it's an aspect, an issue highly discussed lately, and there are some states that are trying to become positive examples that are actually trying to support the young people into their integration, but it's still, there are some inequalities, because there are the political, social, and economic status of the refugees and their treatment in these countries. So the areas of concern for young people going through transition to adulthood and autonomy and facing a change in their legal regime involves issues that with age determination, general concerns regarding legal frameworks, lack of information, loss of support by the guardians or social care, loss of psychosocial support, and of course, loss of access to employment. Young people in transition from childhood to adulthood and autonomy are subject to different regulations and legal framework in European countries. Thus, their legal status depends on the territory where they live themselves, where they find themselves. I mean, different countries all over Europe have different legislations and different derivatives, and young refugees find themselves facing different kinds of problems no matter where they come from or where they find themselves. Article 25 of the Asylum Procedure Directive states that may even choose not to appoint a legal representative to a young person. So whenever, when you are a child and you are seeking for asylum and you go to the asylum seeking service, you have the right to have a legal guardian, you have the right to be appointed to a lawyer, you have the right for a social worker to accompany you while having the interview. So while you become an adult, like when you are 18 plus 15 days and you go to your asylum seeking office, you are on yourself. You need to do it on your own. You need to support yourself on your own, and we all know that seeking for an asylum and explaining details of what happened to you, why you had to leave your house, how was the travel, what would you do, for example, if you saw a soldier threatening your mother, because like the asylum seeking interview is something that it's really difficult, and it puts people in a really difficult position. So it's not so easy for someone who's 18-year-old to respond to questions that have to do with themselves, with their past experience, with the troubles that they had, the difficulties that they faced, the dangers that they faced. I mean, we have like someone stealing our phone and we don't feel so comfortable talking about it. So imagine what would happen to a minor that was most probably raped or exploited in some way, or that it is a human trafficking victim. So describing all these things and sharing the experience by yourself without anyone being there to support you is not something that you can easily handle with. So this is a graph that shows actually how can I say it, like the cases, the positive cases of children being given asylum, and then in yellow, actually in yellow color, we see the first instance, the percentage of the kids that being granted to asylum, and in blue, the adults, which means that if you're an adult, which means that if you're like 18 plus 1, most probably, you will not have a chance to be granted to an asylum, or your percentages will drop a lot. Okay, as said, while transiting to adulthood, they lose a guardian, they lose a social worker. Most probably they need to change facility, which means that they will lose their house as well. They will lose their support network, they will lose themselves, their friends, I'm sorry. Everything changes from one day to another. In many countries, people who are over 18 do not have the right to apply for family unifications, which means that if you are in Greece, you are like 18 plus 2 months and your family is in Germany, you are already considered an adult and you don't have the right to do family unification. You need to stay in Greece. If you take your asylum, of course, you will be given a travel document. You can travel and visit your family, but you cannot apply for a family unification, which means that you lose your right to have a secure environment with your family. Okay, as said, in many cases, you lose your shelter as well. Children beyond the age of 18 are always given housing, are always settled in some kind of accommodation, but as you become 18, you need to be transferred, in many cases in camps. So it's not an easy option, it's not an easy case for many unaccompanied, for many young refugees who actually choose to live in apartments by themselves without being able to support them. And in that case, they might engage in different kind of illegal actions, or you might find 15 people living together in order to be able to support themselves, which is actually not an appropriate living environment for a person of 18 years old or 19 years old, for a young person. In many cases, they do not have access to education, as there's no one there to support them to enter their education system. There's a huge language barrier, there's loss of information, they don't have access to lawyers, or there's not enough translation available. The legal issue is a big thing. Bureaucracy, they cannot get social security numbers, they cannot issue tax ID numbers, so in many cases they cannot work, they cannot even go to a doctor. Okay, this is again the same issue discussed, as they need to change house, they're left without social status, or they're left without any kind of supportive network. And in many cases, as said, they're not even able to generate income because they don't have the legal documentation to do it. So you might find them doing something illegal, or you might them working, as we say, in black. I mean, without, like, yeah, without receiving money, or in many cases in Greece, we had like minors working in, we had like work exploitation cases. They were working for weeks without proper living conditions, living in the streets, and in the end, they were not being paid after at all. Organizations and the Council of Europe and the all the international organizations are discussing about the issue and are trying to find a way to support the young refugees in their struggle to survive, but still I think that we're in the point of discussing it and issuing recommendations by the Council of Europe. But I don't know what happens in your countries, but in many cases I don't see any durable solutions or solutions that actually solve the problems. I see that, yes, we can discuss about it. Yes, we all say, yeah, we should do this and we should do that, and we should offer this and we should find alternatives, but in the end, we see the people that are facing the problem taking mostly baby steps towards like becoming better. So this is a graph that shows the numbers of unaccompanied minors that came to Europe. We see that there's a peak in 2015 where we had the Syrian crisis, and then we have a second one the years after 2019 where people from Afghanistan started arriving to Europe. Okay, as said, the number of unaccompanied minors in Europe is small. As discussed by the lady from Lithuania, it's like a 15.3, which is something that I think that all countries can face, can afford, can offer solutions, can offer a better future to the people. Okay, the highest numbers of unaccompanied minors are traced in Slovenia, Italy, and Bulgaria, and the smallest one in Lithuania and Estonia. Okay, this is the number of the first-time asylum applicant children in UK, in European Union, I'm sorry. With yellow color, we see the ages from 2011 till 2021, and with blue, we have the 2021 year itself. It is when the relocation scheme opened again. Are you aware of the relocation scheme, the program? Do you know the relocation program? So it's when the relocation program opened again after the strict and severe and difficult COVID period that we had. So minors started traveling from Greece to the different European countries so that they can either have family unification or claim asylum there. Okay, in Greece, since this summer, ¿hay algún problema con la traducción? Okay. Lo puedo hacer, intentar hacerlo en español, ¿sabes? Un domingo. Ah. Okay, ¿puedo continuar? Okay. So in Greece, since last summer, we had this joint ministerial decision that actually now says that Turkey is a safe country for nationals from Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So whenever they go to the asylum seeking office and they claim their case and they're asking for the asylum, they need to explain to the officers there why they had to leave Turkey, which is now a safe country, and why did they have, and not why they had to leave Afghanistan or Syria or whatever. Which means that if I'm a lady from Afghanistan and I go to the asylum seeking office, I have to convince them that Turkey was not a safe country for me, which in the majority of the cases never happens. which means that most of the asylum cases now in Greece get rejected. So, as a consequence, and it's not only that, is that Turkey does not, in many cases, does not accept refugees from Greece that are rejected to their asylum case, which means that you cannot live in Greece and you cannot live in Turkey. So I guess you can only live in international waters, I don't know where. But in none of these cases, which means that if you are a boy from Pakistan and you live in a shelter for unaccompanied minors, once you become an adult, you cannot do anything at all. You cannot claim legal status, you don't have any documentation, most probably you need to find a place with other people to stay and a way to generate income in an illegal way, without it being, like, follow it somehow. Okay, so the numbers in Greece. Now we have 2,000, this is the latest numbers that we have in Greece. We have 2,037 children in total, out of which the vast majority are boys. In Greece, we have a newly established tracking mechanism for unaccompanied minors that live in precarious conditions, which means that when we have social workers, we have street work. We have people working in the streets trying to trace unaccompanied minors. And then we have a hotline where we can call and we can say, we see that this minor is living in the streets, and then the social worker will approach him and he will be given a shelter. Initially, he will be taken to the police, he will give his fingerprints, he will give his personal information, and then he will be transferred to a temporary facility until he's officially registered by the asylum seeking office, and then to a more permanent one, which means that he will be given, let's say, an extension of living in the country for another 1 or 2 years, because after that he's going to claim his asylum, and as a third-country national, most probably he will be sent back to Turkey. Well, this is the case now in Greece, and as field workers, we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know what to do. There's no provision about it. And in many cases, you know, please forgive what I'm going to say, but in many cases you find yourself thinking that perhaps you should find a good smuggler and try to travel to Europe in a decent way to find another life. Perhaps Germany can offer a different life, or Norway, or I don't know what. But in Greece, there's no chance at all. When you cannot say that, you try to find different ways to empower him and to tell him that, listen, perhaps you can do this, or we should do that, or we can find a friend or a family, or let's see what we can do. But in the end, you know that there's actually nothing that you can do, because you're not above the law, and the law is there, and you cannot do anything to override it. So you can offer as much as you can. Well, in Greece, the living conditions for unaccompanied minors are not ideal. I don't know if you have the same in your countries. So many of them live in reception centers, which means that they are in the entrance points, either in the islands or by the river on the north. Some of them, they used to be shelters within the camps. They were called safe houses, safe spaces, which means that they were houses with 5 or 6 rooms. They could host up to 30 unaccompanied minors. They were they were people like social workers, psychologists, lawyers, and of course caregivers working there. All those facilities were working on a 24/7 basis, as minors could not be left unattended. Always someone had to be there. And especially in the cases where the facilities were inside the camps with the general population, where minors in a big camp were facing like pretty severe security issues on a daily basis, because in a refugee camp you can see and find everything. Many of them live in supported independent living apartments, which means that it's a semi-dependent living. They live on themselves, but they have people visiting and offering services. Emergency accommodation facilities, as I said, in many of the cases, they were hotels. After the big fire in Moria, a big number of unaccompanied minors that were there like almost for a year, living inside the camp, not being able to go out, not being able to go anywhere. Well, actually inside the camp, it's not exactly inside the camp, because Moria was a huge area that had like both supposedly a space for minors and then the jungle, and many minors used to live in the jungle because there was not enough space for in the safe space, which was not a safe space. So a big number of minors were transferred immediately after the fire from the island to hotels all over Greece, and they were like given rooms in the hotels. The situation was not that easy, because when they came, when they arrived, they were like literally with nothing. No papers, no clothes, no personal items, nothing. So the process was long. We had to go to the island to find papers. There had to be like a constant communication. Things were not running, and then we had the COVID as well, which means that cases were delayed. They could not leave Greece. They could not go to their families. They could not enter the relocation scheme. We had documents. I'm sorry. We had ticket issued that they had to be taken back because someone in the whole, let's say, hotel had COVID, and then we were all afraid, and they were not allowed to leave. It was quite difficult. Anyway, and then these are the facilities. So we have like shelters, we have people living in camps, we have semi-dependent living, and then we had the emergency facilities. So this is the situation in Greece. Numbers keep becoming smaller, because as said, we have constant rejections. People are obliged to leave the country. They are taken out of the facilities, and the legislation decides for them that they should, I don't know, either live in the streets or find alternative ways to survive in the country or to live to Europe. Thank you. Yeah. No, they're not anymore. No? They're fast because they reject. It's easy. So that's one question. And the other one, like the numbers you gave us of unaccompanied minors in Europe are like, is that asylum seeking, like unaccompanied minors that have Asylum. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, because I was surprised by the low numbers in Spain. But that's because nobody here knows. We saw yesterday they don't ask for asylum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's by the UN. The numbers are from the UN, so. Yeah.
I was wondering if it was the ones that applied for.
Yeah, they're the ones applied, yeah. Yeah.
I think in France they have the same system as here. They don't have to
apply for asylum to enter the system,
Yeah. Yeah, that's the cases where they ask, they apply. Yeah. 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 You want to ask something?
How many were transferred to other European countries last year?
I don't know the exact number, but it's the, I'm sorry. So the relocation program is still running, so it's not a specific number of people. It's like you apply for the relocation program, you enter the program, then you get the decision that you will go to Spain or to France or wherever. And then when you have the flight, I mean, you are transferred to a temporary facility, and then when the day of the flight arrives, you just fly. It's a constant running program. So I think that it's more than 2,000 minors, but it's still running. It's how they relocate. In some cases, some young refugees, which means some adult refugees, are lucky enough to leave Greece, because when they applied for the relocation program, they were minors. But this does not count for their asylum, because if your interview is when you are an adult, you are judged as an adult. It doesn't matter if you enter the country as a minor. But in the relocation, you can enter as a minor, and because it's a process, I mean, yeah, and sometimes it might take long, so if you enter as a minor, you can go as an adult.
Is there a strong political lobby in order to change this legal framework?
¿Quieres decir si hay argumentos? No. They changed it already, they did it. That's what they did. But they changed it for the worse. For the worse, yeah. Yeah, that's the case. No, because we have a different rhetoric now in Greece. From refugees, they became illegal migrants. So we reached to a point where we characterize a person as illegal. So there was a, how can I say it, like there was a strong advocacy against refugees and not for them. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I thought you said add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something because I also was working in Greece, and I think before that, yes, there was, but now Greece is very overwhelmed with the arrivals, and locals are very tired. So everything that is happening is mostly from grassroots international organizations, like small organizations from Germany, England, Netherlands. There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. Hello. Did you hear anything that I said before? Yes? No, I was just saying that like Greeks, like locals are very tired of the situation with the arrivals that have increased a lot over the years, and that there is some political movements, but it's mostly from small grassroots organizations coming from other countries, but they're also kind of being kicked out of the country now. Slowly, there's like long process of registrations that are never happening. And then that on top of the numbers that you saw, there's a lot of minors that are not registered, that don't claim asylum, that don't want to get caught, so like they just hide in the in the streets, but also like in the mountains, and they try to go up through the Balkan routes. And that one last thing I want to say was that most support for minors that I've seen in camps comes from communities in the camp. So like for Afghan children, there is the Afghan community that helps them, Syria, etc. But on the government level, I haven't seen a lot, to be honest. So that's it.
So now we have a 30-minute break, and we'll be back here in half an hour, okay? 12:30. Yes, and we have, there will be coffee and some food in the terrace, in the museum bar, okay, downstairs. You can find. So you have that I wanted to ask. Okay, so welcome back. So during this first session today, we've learned about the many challenges that our partners face well, in this work for trying to work with and guarantee the rights of unaccompanied minors in their respective countries. Some of these problems are shared and are equal in all of the member states, and others are really particular. But now, to end in a more positive note, we're gonna hear about some good examples and good practices in other partner countries. So first, our partners from Austria are gonna tell us about the work they do and the programs that they have to learn about some good practices and good examples. And then our colleagues from partners from Czech Republic will do the same. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, so first, of course, we have the same problems in Austria than all of you talked about yesterday and today. We have a lot of unaccompanied minor refugees leaving the country and so on, as Lisa will tell you later on. But we thought to give an example for good practice, we decided to talk about our recently started campaign for unaccompanied minor children. I will start talking a little bit about introducing our organization, Asylkoordination Österreich. Then Lisa will take over. She's our specialist on unaccompanied minor refugees. And then I will introduce you to our campaign. Asylkoordination Austria was founded in the early 1990s. We celebrate our 30th and 1+1 anniversary this year, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks from now, on the 1 week, 20th of May. Yeah, sure, 1 week. We are networking organizations, like not a really umbrella organization, but more like a networking hub for organizations working with and for refugees. This one, yeah. What we do, we have this nice graphs from our graphic designer. We do networking in the field of NGOs in Austria and on an international level. We coordinate 27 accommodations for unaccompanied minors. This, Lisa is in charge of this network. Then we had a network for organizations providing psychotherapy for torture survivors and refugees. Now we run 2 projects in this field. One is NIPE, that is mainly financed by the European Commission. And the second one is RESET, financed by the Ministry of Social Affairs. That's mainly in each of the federal states, one, or in Vienna and Styria, 2 organizations that provide these services for refugees. Then we have 10 organizations, independent organizations for legal counseling. That's our colleague Lukas Karleitner, who coordinates them. And he also organize every year the so-called Asylum Forum. That's a meeting, a conference with more than between 100 and 150 colleagues who work in the field of asylum, people who do legal counseling, and from all the networks. And we are part of national and international networks like ECRE. Most of the organizations in these projects are two members of ECRE, Network for Children's Rights, Network Kinderrechte, European Guardianship Network, and what is it? Separated Children in Europe. Then we are hub for campaigns. Our recent campaign is Child is Child, Kind is Kind. We will talk later on. The last was Verlassen, which was quite successful because we really managed to change things there. The other one, which was unfortunately not so successful, was Sicher Sein, where we we tried to stop deportations to Afghanistan in 2018, 2019. In these campaigns, we develop new narratives, new frames for these issues, and we do a lot of advocacy, meetings with politicians, with civil servants, and I just talked with the colleagues from Prague. We have a similar experience in the last months. In Austria, it was due to the coalition of that the Green Party is part of the ruling coalition, and now after 30 years, at a sudden we have people who want to speak with us, who listen to us, and yeah, so. Okay, then we are providing expertise and public relation, and we do also a little bit research. We are resource persons for journalists. We are providing expertise for volunteers and professionals. We publish a quarterly magazine, and if there is somebody here who reads German, I can give you one copy of our latest magazine, our latest issue with the topic of Child is Child of the campaign. We are producing on a regular basis information material, graphics, folders, and so on, and we run our website, www.asylum.at. We do educational work, awareness raising in schools, mostly in Vienna and in Lower Austria, that is the federal state around Vienna. Last year we had 65 workshops in schools. We have 6 different formats about how people have to leave their country, how they flee, about the asylum system, the asylum procedure in Austria, and we have one very nice workshop with Afghani colleagues where we built kites with the pupils in school. And this year we will organize the second time a summer school for teachers with the issue of anti-racist or racist critical education. We also have a buddy project connecting people where we connect Austrians, volunteers with unaccompanied minors. these unaccompanied minors, they stay in the institutions where they live and are cared for, and these volunteers give them additional help. They learn with them, they do their homework, they meet them at the weekend to do some trips and things like that. We do this for the last 20 years, and we had about 800 of unaccompanied minors in this project. And last not least, we offer trainings and seminaries for mainly professionals, but also volunteers working in the field of asylum and refugees. And the reason why we are here, we also like to be invited to transnational projects, working together, especially with OPU for many years, but also with other organizations and with ECRE. And we do the AIDA country report for ECRE every year. We had a project with colleagues from Greece, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Hungary, Balkan refugee trails some years ago. We do sports projects, and we are part of different political networks in Austria too. So now Lisa will take over, and so yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the situation of unaccompanied minors in Austria before we come to our campaign, just to know what we are talking about. Also, it's a lot of problems, and not the good share practice, but as just to know what is going on. So the numbers from last year, you can see there that 5,768 unaccompanied minors applied for asylum in Austria. Most of them, and this was for the last maybe 15, 20 years, always from Afghanistan. It's always between 55 and 70% are from Afghanistan. And the second biggest group is Syria with 25%, and then the third country, it's far away from them. It's usually Somalia or Pakistan or Iraq. Altogether, we had 11,000 or nearly 12,000 minors, so accompanied and unaccompanied, but 3,000 of them were born in Austria. So if the parents have asylum in Austria or are in asylum process or have subsidiary protection and the children is born, then they have to be made an asylum application. So there's always this huge number of asylum applicants who are born here. Do you have a question? No. Okay. And a huge problem we talked about yesterday and today, and it seems to be a huge problem in Europe, is that a lot of children are going missing. So 2021, around, it's difficult to say a number, but I would say at least this 3,138 unaccompanied minors left Austria. We know this number because asylum procedure is stopped, and asylum procedure is stopped when they left Austria. So at least those left Austria, and no one knows what's happening to them, because no one, as we heard before, yesterday and today, no one cares, no one tracks those. I'm sure that most of them are going to other countries in Europe, but we don't know, and there is the possibility that they are victims of child trafficking, of human trafficking. We don't know. So it's a huge problem, I would say. And what is the situation now? So there are 1,400 unaccompanied minors in Austria right now. So you see the applications. From these applications, you can say that less than 900 are made adults with the age assessment. So they have to put away this 800 from age assessment. 900 from age assessment, and there were some Dublin transfer. It was 8 Dublin outs last year, so it's not really a important number. And most of them are gone missing, and so there are 1,400 in Austria, in institutions in Austria. Less than 400 are in the first phase of the asylum procedure, so with the state institution, and more than 1,000 are in the federal states in the second phase of the asylum process. So we have to divide always in the first and in the second phase of the asylum process, because in the first phase there's the age assessment for the unaccompanied minors, where it's checked, so usually with grown-ups it is checked if Austria is responsible for the asylum procedure or not. And with the unaccompanied minors it is the age assessment primary, and they're in a state institution, in a huge camp. There are several camps in Austria. And one of the most problems is that there is no guardianship at all during this phase. And the minors are there for weeks, or in some cases months, with no guardianship at all. And we see that most of those who gone missing are in this first phase of the asylum procedure, because there is no guardian, there is no good supervision. These are huge camps with several hundreds of children. So even so, this state authority is doing very good. They changed a lot in the last years, but it is no place for children. And as they are there for that long, and a lot of children are going missing during this time. And then in the second phase of the asylum procedure, it's much better. They get in the federal states, and there's no state institution who is accommodating them. It's NGOs. So then if they get to the second stage, then the Youth and Welfare Authority takes the guardianship, but they have only the file, more or less, so they are the guardians, but they give one part of the guardianship is the supervision and education, it is called, and they gave this part of the guardianship to the NGO, and they have social workers there, they have 24/7 care for them, they check school, they check everything for them. Even so, the guardianship is with the authority. And the authority usually does the legal representation, so they're doing the asylum process with them, but the accommodation is and the care work is with the NGOs. But the most thing is that the NGO are facing there is that they get much less resources for accommodating them than if they would accommodate Austrian children. So with asylum seekers, there is a fee of 95 euros per day per minor that the NGO gets. And it can't be higher than this 95 euros. If they accommodate Austrian children, there is no limit. So the authority looks what does the children need, and then there's the fees set. Usually it's between, so I would say 170, 200, 250 euros. But if the children has disabilities, it can be 800 euro per day. But with unaccompanied minors, this is the 95 euros limit, total limit. So the thing is that they have really limited resources, and they need a lot of donation to do a good care work for the unaccompanied minors. Yeah, as I told you, the three main problems are the guardianship, that there's no guardianship at all at the first phase, then the different resources the children have, so the NGOs have with accommodating and offering care work to the children. And the third thing is about education, because in Austria we have this law of obligatory obligation. So if you are under 18, you have to be in some kind of school, in some kind of vocational training, so you need to be in some kind of education. But asylum seekers are excluded from this law, so they don't have to be in education, and as they don't have to be in education, the state doesn't need to provide any education for them. So that's the third problem. So we in our campaign we figured out these main problems. Here again about the guardianship. Here Austria is the far last country in Europe that takes that long to appoint a guardian to a minor. Was this report. Yeah, I've talked about the resources, about the limits, the living groups. There's 3 kind of living groups. There's one guardian to one social worker to 10 unaccompanied minors, or to 15 or 20. It depends on the kind of accommodation and also on how independent the minors are. Yeah, and education, we talked about this already.
Nein, nicht.
Okay.
What Lisa did to figure out the three main problems was also one of the first steps when we decided to run a campaign for equal rights for unaccompanied minor refugees, because there are many problems for these children, and so the first step was to find out what are the main and the most important problems, also to talk about in public and to the politicians and civil servants. We ask a guy who is specialized in political communication, Dominik Sinnreich, and we knew him from from cooperation in another project, and he supported us in the beginning of this campaign. So he worked pro bono for us because he was convinced that it's a very important issue. One of the first steps of the campaign was to find a different narrative. A narrative that enables empathy and has a mobilizing effect. First of all, Dominik has taken on the central term, on the name children or these unaccompanied minors are named usually, and in Austria we use the term UMF, unaccompanied minor refugee, F for Flüchtling, it's German for refugee, and that sounds very bureaucratic. You don't see a person behind UMF, so what is it? Yeah? Is it a motor oil or something like that? Yeah? Dominik came with the, he asked us, what you do with children without parents, you help them. And how you name children without parents, okay, they are orphans. So why those people have no parents? Because they fled their country, they left their country, they are refugees. So we found the term Fluchtwaisen, so refugee orphans or flight orphans. So that was the first step. It was not easy to convince our colleagues to accept this term because they are used for 20 years to say UMF. So, okay, that was the first and very important step. And then we got some journalists and scientists to use this term. And now, when we were preparing for our presentation here, I googled Fluchtwaisen, and I found really 800 or something like that. So, because all our colleagues nowadays, most of our colleagues use it in their communication, and some journalists and scientists too. The second step was to set a frame for the campaign, and we didn't want to talk only about problems, about negative things, so we wanted to rather concentrate on the potentials and resources of young people that cannot be realized in this status quo. We collected stories that show that young people can achieve what they can achieve if they are in a supportive environment. The next step was to translate this positive narrative to a graphic concept, and here you see the first steps. And this was more or less the result. We cooperated with an agency who helped us in these other two campaigns that I mentioned, this Sicher sein and Fair lassen. And we said to them, okay, we want something that is nice, that shows a positive attitude, shows strength, and so on. And they came with this. And the second thing was that it's always a problem when you talk about children. Even the media, sometimes they bring pictures of 10 years old children, and then you come with this 17 years Afghani, as yesterday he told, I had a beard and nobody believed me that I'm under 18. So we said we have to show really pictures of refugees. So we went with our photographer to some of the institutions and took pictures there, and incorporated this in the visual design of the campaign. Here you see the result. That's children from Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and one is a relative of our photographer, because the slogan of the campaign is "Child is child." So every child should have the same rights. We should use the same resources for these children. What we do the influx of the refugees from the Ukraine started, so we had to postpone the start of the campaign, but we nevertheless we started on 25th of March with the campaign. We had two well-known actresses who helped us in the presentation. They presented a text which is a positive vision of how we could support unaccompanied minors, or Fluchtwaisen, as flight orphans, as we use the term now. And we did it in a theater. The theater specialized on theater performances for children, so children's theater. We had good media coverage. We had the public TV and public radio there, so it was quite a good start. Now it's a little bit difficult because most of the organizations, we have 40 NGOs supporting the campaign, but now in these times many of our colleagues are very busy with helping the refugees from Ukraine, and so the resources are a little bit low. What we do, we organize events all over Austria. We try to do it similar to the opening event in theaters with actors or actresses. We are going to produce a short video for the use in cinema and in social media. We do a lot of campaigning with these pictures, with these graphics in social media, in Instagram, Facebook, and so on. And a very important part is the advocacy part. And we are with this advocacy, we had a lot of talks already, and we were quite successful. Maybe Lisa will say some words about this latest success.
So yeah, we are doing advocacy, not that much until now about education, but about the resources and most important about the guardianship, because there is in our governmental agreement with the Greens and the Conservatives, they say they want to change this this guardianship thing, but the governmental agreement is now some years ago and nothing happened, and we are on this topic for quite a long time, and we keep talking about about it with political decision makers. We have also to convince the federal state governments, because children's law is not about the national law; it is made in the federal states. So this is a huge topic. But yeah, as Herbert told you. Things are going on, and a very good thing is that the Ministry of Justice, she's from the Greens party, and she is a refugee by herself. That's also a really good thing. She's from Bosnia, but she's now here for 30 years or so. But she's a really good person, I would say. And we convinced her to take over this topic, and the guardianship law is something in her ministry, so it's up to her to change this law, but she needs, of course, the federal states government, and she needs the Conservatives to change the law. But we convinced at least the Ministry of Justice, Alma Sadic, and recently, just before we came here, the day we came to San Sebastian, she did a long Facebook post and a media, how do we call it? Abmeldung.
Emission, media emission, press emission. Press release. Yeah.
Press release about the missing children. So, and it's our topic, so no one else is talking in Austria about the missing children. And she stated that how many children are going missing every year, and that we need guardianship from day one, because a lot of children are going missing. So it's a huge topic right now. So it's a little bit difficult for us now, because we are here and media wants to talk to us right now.
We gave an interview day before yesterday.
Yeah. So we gave an interview in Madrid at the airport.
Live in the public TV.
Yeah. And yesterday with so
yesterday
it was yesterday in the morning. We gave a live interview for the TV broadcast, and from Madrid, from the airport, we gave an interview for the radio broadcast. So it's kind of funny that, because Alma Sadic, the Minister of Justice, did this the day before we went to San Sebastian. So things are going on with our campaign.
Okay.
So you want to talk?
No, it was funny, because Lisa is always talking about these missing children, and I did a release for our supporters day before yesterday, and I thought, okay, again this topic for the third time in the last year, and nearly yesterday Sadic came out with this issue, so it's the first really success of our advocacy work in the frame of the Kind is Kind, Child is Child campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Because you just talked about the successes, do you have, I know that this is a question that probably books could be written about, but do you have any tips, like what brought the change? Like how did you reach out to the minister, and like would you share some tips for effective advocacy in this field?
Most of the things is that the Greens are in the government. We do not talk to the Conservatives, or they are not really talking to us. So, and it's a lot of work that primarily our colleague Lukas Garleitner put in this. He's meeting with them every time, and also with the journalists. We tell them, please ask us if you need anything, just call us. So, yeah.
I think it's important that to find a good proportion of critique and willingness to cooperate. So, and sure, without the Green Party, there wouldn't have been this these things. But okay, we are annoying them all the time, and yeah.
And also in some part our work got different, because with the right-wing party our work was easy. It was just bashing, 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 bashing. But now we have to find the balance between criticizing the government and also cooperating with them.
Well, first of all, congrats on your success, on this advocacy success. And I have a quick question, because I'm just curious. You said that NGOs get, like, there's a limit on the money they get for accommodating asylum refugee children and not for Austrian. And like, what's the justification, or what's the reason? Like, it seems discriminatory.
It is. It is just like this. So because it's a kind of law. The Austrian children, if they are in institutions, if they can't live with their parents, they are in the child welfare system. All over, it's paid by the federal states, by the child welfare system. With child refugees, like all refugees, also grown-ups, but the fees far beyond 95 euros, are not in this child welfare system. They are in the basic care system for aliens. So it's two different systems.
And it's the same problem of these two systems now with refugees from the Ukraine who have special needs. Because this basic support system, they have no resources for people with special needs. They should be in the normal system, and that's nowadays this big discussion in Austria.
And that's also the topic of one of the topics of our campaign, that unaccompanied minors are not seen as children because they are not in the child welfare system. They are seen as grown-ups. They are in the basic care grown-up system.
So you said that there's no obligatory education, and I just wonder, what do they do then? Do they work? Do they have a work permit? Is this a thing?
Until 15, there is another law that every child until 15 have to be in school, and this obligatory education is between 15 and 18. And yes, there's a problem. They are not allowed to work. So there, of course, the NGOs offering German courses. There are some kind of offerings on because of donations, because of voluntary offerings, and they can go to school if the school is accepting them. So schools are open, but you need to fulfill the requirements. And very often young refugees, the German skills are not that well, so they are not fulfilling the requirements for the schools. They are more or less not that allowed to work. There are some possibilities, but it's hard to find a job in the small things that they can do. So yeah, a lot of doing nothing, I would say.
Also now we got a new law where it's, was heißt jetzt Lehre auf Englisch? Lehre.
Vocational work.
Vocational?
Training.
Es gibt egal. There's this twofold system, educational system in Austria. So if you learn handicapped, you have vocational training with additional 1 day school. And that's in theory open for refugee children, young refugees too now. It was for years forbidden, every kind of work was forbidden, and now they, if they can find someone who give them this 3 years vocational training, they can start. But also the problem is language skills and so on. Yeah. And also the state of the labor market. Yeah. If there are no jobs, or not enough jobs for Austrian youth, so you can't get a job as a young refugee. Yeah? So it's in the Western federal states, it's better, especially in tourism and so on. Yeah.
Should I talk into this one or into both?
Yes, you talk to this one and this one. Both.
Okay.
This is for us to hear you and this is for the...
Takhle, že jo? Takhle. Tak to dělá dlouho. Yeah, I will try this way. Okay, no, I will just hold it. Okay, can you hear me? Yes? Okay, so hello, my name is Kristina. I'm from Czech Republic and I work as a lawyer in Organization for Aid to Refugees. And today I'm going to talk about unaccompanied refugee minors in Czech Republic, and I want to talk about some good practices, about some not so good practices, because yeah, it's impossible to not talk about that. First of all, about our organization. It's a non-governmental, non-profit humanitarian organization founded also in 1991. And we provide mainly, the main focus is on legal and social consultations for refugees and for foreigners in general. ¿Se escucha? No? I'm sorry. It's off? Okay. Now it's better? Yes? Okay, sorry. Okay, so we focus mainly on legal and social consultations for the refugees. We also organize some educational programs, and then also we have some campaigns and information for general public, combating xenophobia, disinformations, and so on. About the unaccompanied refugee minors, we have a specialized team for that since 2003, and there is a lawyer and social worker who are once a week visiting the minors in the facility for children, and they provide consultations. They can do psychological and psychiatric help, or we can pay for that for the minors if needed. They're also working together to prepare the minors to leave the institution. There are workshops organized, so it's like whole scale of issues that we cover there. We also have a halfway house and some volunteering programs, and I'm going to talk about this a little later. Yeah, I put here some statistics about the numbers of unaccompanied refugee minors in Czech Republic. So you can imagine for how many children, how big is the work, like how many clients do we have in this. These are the last year and this year up until now. Before those years, the numbers were actually much smaller, and not many. Yeah, well, I will talk about that later. But last year, you can see in those statistics the reflection of the events and the crises in the world, that last year we had quite a lot of refugees from Afghanistan. This year we are having quite a lot of unaccompanied minors from Ukraine. I will first talk about some legal procedures regarding the unaccompanied minors, what they go through, what are the options, what are the good practices and what are the problems a little bit. And after that, I'm going to talk about the social services that we provide, which are also very beneficial for the minors. Okay. So, after arrival, when the minor arrives to Czech Republic, his first contact is either with Czech police or with the Ministry of Interior of the Czech Republic. Czech police, usually if they find them somewhere, or ministry if they come straight to ask for international protection. The state institution call the translator always to communicate with the person, and if they find out that they are minors, they have to immediately call the social and legal the authority for social and legal protection of children, and this authority then works as a guardian who informs the court about the situation, that there is a minor, and the court acts quickly, and within 24 hours they render a preliminary measure, and they place them into the facility for foreign children. The facility, we have just one facility for foreign children. It's operated by the Ministry of Education since 2004, and it's based in Prague. Almost all of the unaccompanied minors at least pass through it, until they decide what will be next step. Some of the problems that there are with this facility is mainly the high proportion of an escape rate, which is connected very much with the fact that Czech Republic is usually not the final destination of the refugees. So, like, this is a big problem that they are dealing with. And also, when the child arrives, they will withhold his finances and mobile phone. So that's also an issue. And so when the minor is in the facility, he basically has three options what to do regarding the residential status. First would be applying for international protection. Then if he has some family member in European Union, he can ask to be reunited with his family, or he can ask for permanent residence permit. So we'll talk a little bit about the three options. The application for international protection is actually not happening very often. We saw it in one of the graphs that was presented here today, that like the minors in Czech Republic, they usually don't ask for international protection. However, if they do, the OSPOT, the Authority for Social and Legal Protection of Children, are guardian of them throughout the procedure, and they also can work with some NGO lawyers that can help with the procedure as well. Yeah. That's about that. Then if they have a family member, they can ask for reunification through the Dublin regulation. That's pretty straightforward. The problem that's there is the length of the proceedings, because it can take 5 months to be reunited, which is a really long time. But then, like, the permanent residence permit is the interesting part about residence status of the minors. So before they are 18 years old, they usually go through this procedure. That's the majority do this kind of procedure, and it goes like this. First of all, when the OSPOT, the Authority for Protection of Children, informs the court about the presence of a minor, unaccompanied minor, they do the preliminary measure within 24 hours, and they state in this preliminary measure that that the minor is entitled to stay in the Czech Republic without a visa. That's the first part. But after that, the court is assessing the situation furthermore, and within a few months, usually it can take about 2 or 3 months, they place them in the facility for children, or they entrust them into the facility, and when they are placed in the facility permanently, they get the permission for permanent residence, and that permission for that permanent residence they have up to 18 years. So up until they are 18, they don't need to do any more procedures regarding their residency. But the day that they reach the age of 18 years old, the permanent residency stops, unless they apply for another permanent residence permit for humanitarian reasons. And they have to do that within 60 days after their 18th birthday. And if they do that, they can be almost sure that they will get the permanent residence permit. It's almost automatic in practice right now. There are a few obstacles, but they are very, very serious things. As you can see, they would have to have administrative deportation, or they would have to be a threat to public order. So really, in practice, most of them will get the permanent residence permit. They have also the option to get Czech citizenship. That this is not so common, but it is possible. And they could be granted the citizenship by declaration. And the declaration would have to be made by, in case of those children who are in the facility for foreign children, it would have to be made by the director of the facility. And then if they meet all the requirements for Czech citizenship, they have to get the citizenship, which is different from the normal application for citizenship, because then even if you comply with all the requirements, there is no legal right to get the citizenship. But when they are minors and it's by declaration, they will just get the citizenship. As I said, it doesn't happen so often, but in practice, they do consider this option with the minors who stay longer in the facility, who come younger, maybe at 14, 15, and they stay there for longer time, and they are very well integrated, then they will consider doing that. Now, about the detention of unaccompanied minors. It can also happen. We have a special detention center for vulnerable people in Biela Jezova. It's a prison type facility, and the unaccompanied minor can stay there maximum in 90 days. The only possibility to detain a minor is if he's a threat for security of the state or a serious threat to public order. Plus, they have to always consider the best interest of the child. And the other option, which is much more common, is when there are doubts about age, and they can stay there until the age is determined. Just for your information, for adult foreigners, the only requirement is the initiation of administrative deportation, and then some option that they would flee. So it's much easier, of course. In 2021, there were about 17 detained minors in Czech Republic. And the age assessment, that's always an interesting part of that. It changes the techniques are pretty much same everywhere, so I think you guys know about that. But basically they do an X-ray. Now they are X-raying the collarbones, and they like assess the collarbone. If it's not decisive, if he's minor or not, they can also do an assessment by the social workers working in the detention center. In 2019, there was a project that they would assess the children with a psychologist, but it wasn't really working properly, so they are not doing it again. There was a problem with time. It was very like, it took a long time, and the psychologists weren't available, so it wasn't really flexible, and they need to do the age assessment very quickly. Also, interesting thing is that if they decide about the age, there is 2 years like a discretion. So if they say he's probably 19, he can be 17 to 21, and then it's considered by the courts as not decisive, and then they would have to let him go from the facility, from the detention center. And now about the new things that were brought to us by the refugee wave from Ukraine. As many of you mentioned, the number of refugees from Ukraine, as we are receiving also a lot of them, opened some communication with the state authorities, and some things are being handled in new ways. So I have chosen a few of them to share with you. And I chose the ones that are related to unaccompanied minors, of course. So one of the things that the authorities are doing now is that if the minor is older than 15 years and is capable to take care of himself or of herself, they do not need to be placed in the state facility. They will be just registered with the Authority for Protection of Children, and they can live on their own, and they can take care of their own things. They will just receive some support from the authority. In reality, it's not so smooth, because the Authority for Protection of Children are not providing as much support as those children would need many times. So then it gets complicated, and the children can get into some problems, which sparked a discussion right now about the need of having more halfway housing for children, and not only older than 18, but maybe even for the younger refugees, where they would get more support. And also there is another project to get more support to the refugee minors in every region after arrival, which reacts also on the fact that the unaccompanied minors are not easy to identify, because many times they come with some neighbor family or some people who they some family friends, and so when there is a suspicion that there could be an unaccompanied minor with this project, there should be a worker from our organization who will give some basic legal and social, like legal information and some support. Another thing that we were dealing with recently is the insufficient capacity of the facility for foreign children. Since we were always receiving not so many unaccompanied minors, the facility for foreign children has a capacity about 30 people, but now many more are coming. And so they have the authorities had to deal with it somehow. And the solution is to place the children into correctional facilities. So then they are in the facilities with Czech children who have some real problems, who maybe committed some crimes, who really have like some serious problems. And the problems there are always solved with physical work. So they would work in the field or something very much. And those refugees are expected to do the same. So it's not really the best solution for someone who's fleeing from war and like his stuff to work with, and then he needs to, do a lot of physical work. And I have here case that happened recently, very recently. And it was a boy who was 17 years old who came from Donbas region. And he really came fleeing from the front. He really had a traumatizing experience. He went by himself to ask for the temporary protection. They identified him as an unaccompanied minor, registered him with the Authority for Protection of Children, and he was placed in the correctional facility in Pszów, which is a small city in Czech Republic, a small town. And there he was going through all those physical activities, and like it's a correctional facility. It wasn't easy for him, and he was a student. He's studying online, trying to finish his high school education in Ukraine, but the environment wasn't really great for that. In his case, fortunately, his classmate is coming to Czech Republic as well with his mother, and so they will take the guardianship of him, and they will take him out of this facility. How the other children will be solving this, that's a big problem, and that I don't know. And now something about the social services then for refugee minors. We have a number of social services for children, but I will talk about 3 of them, about the halfway house, and then some volunteer programs that are very beneficial. So the halfway house is working under the title Supported Living for Young Refugees, and it helps the unaccompanied minors who has, of course, no family background to fully integrate and to make easier the transition from the facility for children to a normal life. So it's meant to work for young foreigners from 18 to 26 with valid resident status in Czech Republic. It's been working since 2008, and accommodation is usually provided for 12 months. The capacity for now is quite small. We can have 4 users who live in an apartment in Prague. And the objectives you can see here. They will get some legal consultations. They get assistance with looking for a job, looking for another accommodation, and really all kind of services that a young person who doesn't have a family background could need. I have also a few photos of it. This is the building, and this is the apartment where they are living. So hopefully in the future we will be able to have more halfway houses, because it seems to be really helping, and it seems to be even necessary right now since we have so many unaccompanied minors. And the volunteering programs, I chose 2 that are a little bit similar, and that's the mentoring program and the host care. Mentoring is basically, it's a volunteering program aiming at the integration of the minors, and the mentor is supposed to be like a Czech friend or a guide or a buddy for the unaccompanied minor. The mentor usually gives the mentee some support. He helps him with Czech language, with the homeworks. They also spend free time together, and it usually helps a lot with learning the language. That we can see a big progress with that, and it helps them integrate into society quicker. It's supposed to be long term. At least 6 months, and right now we have about 5 mentoring couples that are working really well, and we will get some more pretty soon. The host care is I named this program host care, but I don't know if it's understandable what it is, so I'm gonna try to explain a little bit. It's type of volunteer work, which is really similar to foster care, but it's not really a foster care, since the tutor of the child is still the authority for protection of children. So legally responsible is still the authority, the state authority, but the child has a family support and some system to support him. So the goal is for the child to experience how regular family live, to have deeper relationships, deeper support, the language progress, and faster integration, of course, as in the mentoring program. It's this one. If mentoring is supposed to be long term, host care is supposed to be really long term. It's like a step further. Sometimes it happens that we have mentors who working with the child who decide to be a host in the future. It can be provided by an individual person or a whole family. And legal requirements for the volunteers are very vague. They just need to have no criminal record. There will be some investigation on family and social situation, and then there can be some other assessment if necessary, which usually is psychological assessment, but it's not necessary, it's not obligatory. So sometimes it can happen that there is no psychological assessment, which could be problematic. The procedure. We do host care in OPU since September 2019, and the procedure is usually finding some good and motivated volunteers, which is quite problematic because the Czech society is also not so well. Let's say that migration is also a difficult topic in our country. However, we will see. Now a lot of things are changing, so maybe even we will have more volunteers for host care. After that, we do some capacitation with psychologists, intercultural workers. We talk about all types of foster care, about host care, about our organization. After the capacitation, we connect the minor with the host family, and then we also provide support and consultations throughout the duration of the relationship, because it is necessary sometimes. And currently we have 4 working host families, and 2 will start very soon. And that's all from me for now. Thank you.
Sí, una pregunta. Es en relación a la determinación de la edad. has comentado que la prueba psicológica se está descartando por no ser fiable. Me llamaba la atención porque aquí precisamente lo que se propone es justo lo contrario, es potenciar la entrevista, la prueba psicológica, y ir dejando de lado la prueba ósea. Hay aquí ahora, en este momento, actualmente una modificación en la ley que regula aquí en el Estado español este sistema de determinación de la edad y que apunta a esto, a la entrevista, una prueba que no sea invasiva, se suele calificar así. Me llamaba la atención. Y luego otra cuestión relacionada con la prueba, con la determinación de la edad, cuando existe un documento que fije una edad, prevalece sobre cualquier otra prueba médica, se suele dudar o cuestionar la calidad o la veracidad de la prueba documental, por ejemplo, certificado de nacimiento, pasaporte. ¿Se ha entendido?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'll translate the question so that
okay.
the rest can understand, and then
Okay.
he was asking. First of all, he was saying that he was surprised that the interview and the psychological assessment was suppressed, it's not considered anymore, because he said that in Spain they are considering to actually being that the one that prevails and giving that more importance to the interview that they want to include in the law, like a non-invasive interview, and that they're gonna like give that importance to that instead of the medical
That's invasive.
test that they do. And then he was also saying that in the case where there is a document like a birth certificate where there is like the age, like how is it in Czech Republic, that do they doubt the truthfulness of that document? Like, do medical tests prevail, or they give like the assumption of truthfulness to that document? I think that was it.
Yes. So the psychological project, or like the assessment by the psychologist, it was started as I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so the psychological assessment started exactly with this idea that it would help us to determine the age, because the X-ray of the bones is just not good enough. It's just not working really well. But in the practice, it wasn't working well because there were not enough available psychologists. It wasn't working fast, since they need to determine the age really fast. It wasn't working because there had to be 2 psychologists, and like there was a whole procedure. It was quite complicated and like time costly. And it just didn't work. But it wasn't working for anyone. Like, we didn't see it as it didn't work well. Maybe if there were more psychologists, if the procedure would be somehow simplified. But it's a question: can it be simplified to determine the age? It was just very, very complicated. So then now what they are doing is that they still do the X-rays, and then they also do like consultation with the social workers. And the social workers, they say, okay, I work with this boy, he seems to me like a child. He's acting like a teenage boy. Or they say, no, I think he's really grown up. The interesting thing is that they do that if the X-rays are not conclusive. As I said, if they say you're 19, you can be 17, you can be 21, And then they ask the social worker, and if the social worker says, no, to me, he looks like a teenage boy, I think he's a minor, then they will send the minor to another doctor to do another assessment. And it's either another x-ray or just, just a checkup by a normal doctor. And then they say like, oh yeah, we did 3 things, and 2 of those things said that he was adult, so he's adult, he's good. And we are fighting those decisions and trying to change this practice.
How you could fight against these decisions, because that's a problem in Austria, that there is no
official document that says it is just a thing in the asylum procedure, but you can't fight it because there's nothing, no decision. It's not it is a decision, but there's no document decision.
Yeah, we also cannot fight the decision of the age, like on its own, but we can fight. We see this mainly in the detention centers. So what happens is that they put the minor in the specialized detention center, and then they move them to the adult detention center. And then you have a decision about detention, and there is arguments about why we decided. That's why I know how it really works like that, because that's is explained in detail, and that we can then we can fight it at the court.
For example, if it's the asylum procedure ends negative, you can fight also the age assessment decision. But if the asylum procedure ends positive, if he or she gets asylum positive, you can't fight the age assessment decision, because you wouldn't appeal against the positive asylum decision.
Yeah, but we really see it mainly at the detention center. That's where they do the assessment mainly. Oh, true. Yes, sorry. Yeah, about the documents. It's very rare that they would have an original of a document. If they do, and it happened just recently to me, then if they see the original document, they will just let them go. And so the originals, they don't doubt so much, but usually they have just a photo or something, and the photo is usually not a good quality, so they take it into consideration. And if they don't if they think it's fake, they really have to have a precise argumentation about why, because if not, then the court will also react to that. Like, the courts are quite good in this age assessment of minors in Czech Republic. Sometimes. Not always. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this we have finished all the presentations. I want to thank all the partners for coming here and contributing with your work and your insight. And we saw a lot of things here. We have a lot of common challenges, and mainly a main one being the high mobility of these children, that they flee one member state, and we completely lose them, and we have no idea what happened with them. So we've talked here about starting thinking about some sort of transnational system, transnational protection. We've also talked about the need and the necessity to have a comprehensive view, or tackling all the different aspects of a child's life in order to have a successful system. But we also saw some positive things. We saw that there can be positive legal changes. We saw that advocacy can lead to something, to changes, and we also were able to see how things are done in other member states. So I think now we have a lot to reflect on. And again, I thank you all for coming here, and we'll see you in Lithuania next month. Thank you.